sharing that, or you take it
this to their own MP3 or MP4 player,
Right.
their iPod, or something.
Usually iTunes. We've found that students, if they download it to their iPod, they're only listening to the audio because that screen's so small, they can't read what your slides say anyway. So what they do is they usually listen to it along with the textbook, or they just watch it purely on their computer itself. So, but it's great, especially for grad students who are actually out in the real world and need a commute. They can either burn it to a CD and listen to it in the car, or just hook their iPod up to their car and listen to it while they're driving. So that's pretty much what we have. Yeah.
Like anything, when I started using KC Online, you have the very basics, and you can build from that.
Right.
If you were just to look at just the basics, if I were to do this, how much time is it going to be involved for me to get up? And I know that's not
Right.
easy to say because you don't know what my skill levels are, but just so that an average individual to be functional, I guess.
Okay. What I would recommend for a basic use case is PowerPoint slides, which hopefully you already have pre-produced. Upload those through the course, and just getting familiar with the talking capabilities. If you lock your talk, that's pretty much all you have to worry about.
I have that times and troubles in class, but
Usually, to be quite honest with you, what most people forget to do is create the archive, because the natural flow of it is as soon as you got your presentation up, is to start. You have to kind of remember, okay, I've got it going. Next step is create the recording. Usually about halfway through, you're like, oh, I didn't record that. So that's kind of the key that most people forget, is to create that recording before they start doing anything else. I say that, and there is also no editing capabilities built into Wimba. So if you start talking about something that you don't necessarily want to be recorded, you can't go back and take that out. We'd have to delete the whole archive. Or if you just publish the videos, you can edit the videos pretty easily. But within Wimba itself, you can't do any editing capabilities. But for a basic use case, not a lot, just kind of getting familiar with some of the tools. And that PDF is a great thing for that, with those tools and descriptions. But other than that, that's the easiest way to kind of jump into it and get involved. What we've seen a lot of departments do is we'll walk by and by the offices down the hall, and you'll hear people laughing and talking to each other office to office, and just kind of playing around with the system and getting used to it that way. But there's not a lot. The nice thing about this is you can use as little or as much as you want, and the students will like it regardless, just because they don't necessarily know the bells and whistles that are there anyway, but they just like getting that content in various flexible ways. So,
I have another question, and I don't see where it really applies, but I'm just kind of curious. Is there a limitation on the number of students in this type of forum that is not conducive to the system? Or?
That is basically personal preference. We've had over 300 people in one room, and we didn't have any problems. It works internationally. I had the privilege a couple years ago to test it in France, and we had about a second delay coming back. The technology this is replacing, I don't know if anybody ever taught with the Real Producer and Real Audio and Chat. There was a 12-second delay right next to you, let alone internationally being about 1 to 2 seconds. So it's a major leap in the right direction technology-wise. But it's kind of personal preference. How many people can you stand to kind of take answers from? And at that level, that's when we had those 15 instructors where they could actually help moderate and take questions when they weren't speaking. So this is a great thing for GTAs to get involved in, because sometimes when you start to get in the flow and speaking and doing the presentation, it's hard to glance down and remember to look to see if anybody has a hand raised. But a GTA can kind of start answering questions as well. So
do a lot of people use it as a recorder simply, I guess?
Some do. At first, we were trying to limit people to do that because we didn't have this video output functionality for accessibility concerns. There was no way to get transcripts of the sessions. Now that's not as big a deal because now we can export as a video or MP3, and there's transcription services that can take that and give you a transcript of your presentation. And in that text chat area in the Wimba, you can actually upload your transcripts, and if you have a student with learning disability, they can actually type /cc, and they can actually see the transcript while they're watching the archive, because it's all time stamped. They won't be able to do it in live unless somebody is typing it out in real time, but through the archive, you can actually insert your transcript for closed captioning in there for the students. So.
Well, you mentioned that the student will have to have Java to be able to see this, right? How do you want them to have to load Java to the machine?
Usually the nice thing is the wizard at the very beginning the first time, it'll basically say, hey, you don't have Java, go here, click here. It basically gives them the images with the big red arrows on where to click and all that good stuff. So, and the help desk, they can help out with that, but we've seen a dramatic decrease in calls for students needing help with that just because of the wizard being there. So, with that, one thing I will say too, the very first time you do this, make a fake session, tell them it's attendance. Students, they're going to show up 10, 15 minutes late, and then you compile that they haven't run through the wizard before that. So that's usually a good time to go over to syllabus and other things that's not as pertinent. That way they get into the system. Because the very first time, people are going to be late and they're going to say, oh, I don't know what to do. And that's a good time just to kind of have a practice session. But don't tell the students that. Make sure they think it's real live class. So that way they attend. But for that first session after that, they should be good to go.
Brian, I think that we all have a tendency sometimes to want our presentations to be perfect. And they typically, if we're in a classroom, they typically are not perfect. Have you kind of got a feel on student standards or student expectations about what the video should be?
They don't want it to be perfect. They get bored. They know that you're a real person, and actually showing that you're a real person will help with that interaction, especially via distance, because that's what they're longing for, is be in the classroom. So if you're coughing, or if you accidentally if you have your camera over, up here and you actually knock it over, that's a good thing, because I don't know if I should admit this, but you might have done the same. When I'm in a webinar or watching something else, I might also be checking email, students that love their Facebook. So you're actually competing for their attention, especially over online. So anything that you can do to kind of help facilitate their attention, the better off you're going to be. So
kind of Shan's question, I guess, is don't spend a whole bunch of time trying to make things perfect.
Right.
Get through it. If the content's there, then.
Right, and that's why I'm glad there's not an editor. Because most people would be, oh, I got to edit this, I put too many uhs, or I was fumbling around. Students, they don't care. And they have a table of contents where they'll jump through what they need to see anyway. So I wouldn't worry too much about it.
I wasn't saying that wasn't,
I know.
Don't stress and don't spend a lot of time on it.
Right.
That's a good point, though.
I think Fred Smith, when he first made his Wimba, I probably should use him. But anyhow, I think he spent like 3 or 4 days giving his first lecture, because he would get to a certain point and go, stop, start over again. That was what the technical part.
Yeah. I give a lot of these presentations, and you guys give a lot of lectures, and so you think you would be comfortable speaking to a computer. Very first time, I don't know how many retakes it took me to say the normal content that I usually say day in, day out. It took me half an afternoon to get something I was even halfway pleased with, just because we're super critical of ourselves when we can play that back in front of us. So don't be. What a lot of people will do is record it, publish it, never look at it again.
All right, well, thanks, Brian, for coming down.